Hello everyone and welcome to Fleet Sunday Streaming. You may notice that yes, I am live, and also yes, it is a certain time. You might say, Fleet, isn't Bruships on? Yes, you are quite correct. For this one time only, Fleet will actually be running in parallel with Bruships. I will be mainly vocally answering questions in Bruships, so look out for that. I will be liaising with chat mostly through text communication. So I might be a little bit delayed in my responses to you. But hopefully that shouldn't demean the process going forwards. Most of obviously what we do here in the early part of a Hoi 4 Let's Play is the setup and the early phases, so there shouldn't be too much to discuss while we're, doing this. Obviously, next week it will be a full interactive stream as you're all used to and expecting. So look forward to that. That's basically the long and the short of it. And once I have finished setting everything up, I will drop into Bruships, and we will then get on with that. There we go. Right, and without further ado, let's drop into Bruships.
Him at all beating me up or various other things. That's because his birthday present is late because Amazon apparently ran out of them.
Amazon running out of something? Shock, horror, say it ain't so.
I'm not sure if dogs entirely understand about birthdays, do they? Also, given that there are supposed to be 6 or 7 dog years to a human year, doesn't that mean he should have one about every 2 months or so?
Well, he certainly believes he should.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
But this was his actual proper birthday, not his half or quarter birthdays.
Right. Wait.
Now, I will say,
On
that for
birthdays?
this Bruships, I am going to be a little tight with the questions because good news, I got a new job. Bad news, I got fired last Monday from my last job. But the semi-bad news is that my new job now starts at 6 a.m. local. I'm not a morning person. My first alarm goes off at 04:30.
Oh,
I'm gonna be
the
a little
poodle
tight
is currently
questions in today.
the poodle is currently offering his brother to come and wake you up. Because the corgi likes to wake up about 0400 hours.
Oh boy.
And the corgi
How
has
does
no
a dog start
no.
at 6 in the morning? That's not a time. Actually, no. To be fair, that is when I did my elective in the States. That was when the day shift started. They did 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. or 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. Which is just horrendous.
Yeah, that's a stonking 12-hour shift. That's
Well,
a proper.
That's a shift in a hospital in the US, isn't it?
Yeah, that was Shreveport, Louisiana.
Shreveport.
Pitt.
No, I don't think he misspoke.
I've been there. It is home to the B-52s basically. As in the big buffs. They're based at the other side of the river.
What we tend to call the big, ugly, fat frigates on this channel.
Yes. They're very big frigates, like HMS Warrior and some of the other very large frigates.
Mm-hmm.
They probably would be classified as frigates if they last long enough into the Star Trek universe, because we all know they're going to turn up. It's like the FV 432, 4312, no 432, 43 what?
Yeah,
431.
yeah.
Yeah, 432. You know that thing. You'll see that. The fact it hasn't been invisible in Star Trek always amazes me, but it's there.
Do you think the shuttlecraft are?
Oh Lord, I hope they haven't updated those things with that. Oh God, Lord, that explains so much about the shuttlecraft.
Some of the shuttlecraft, if you go right down into them, will probably have a serial number of an FB 432 somewhere in
Yeah.
them.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, the B-52 will be receiving its NCC designations and things. Do not defile the sanctity of Star Trek with the warp-capable B-52Z. It's not the B-52Z. It's they got warp power with
B-52ZZ by that point.
No, I think
NCC
they don't take
B-52.
that off. I think it was the B-52W that first got warp drives. The X then got the warp 5 capable ones.
Oh.
I've discovered that you can find a lot of the songs from the musical episode of Star Trek online on YouTube, and I've been interspersing things with my various other video watching the songs from that, which are actually really good.
Questions have been closed, so I need to.
Yes, I have closed questions.
Button.
Sorry, guys, that's my fault.
Whoops.
I will
Michael Cooch,
for your hubris.
The software linkages? Yes, linkages.
Linkages.
Between Bot and OBS to make that banner change with the questions.
Yay. Michael Cooch.
Back pocket your questions until we reopen. The queue has 27.
Yay.
Well, we're off to a good start.
And sorry,
we are.
Doc, can you go in there and
Fleet? One question we have to ask Boop first. How are you bankrupt yet?
What do you mean?
Well, you're starting as Britain in UAD, aren't you?
No. Sunday streaming is Hearts of Iron 4.
Hearts of Iron 4. Oh, again, are you bankrupt yet?
Starting in 1936, first order of business: leave the naval treaties.
Good man.
And then not lay down the KGVs. But I'll try not to reference the game as I'm going on because it's these Bruships.
Nicole Ross, we are now officially A, in awe of you, and B, think people are trying to kill you. Her residency was apparently 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. 5 days a week. Saturday 6 a.m. till 5 p.m. Sunday 6 a.m. till 3 p.m.
Yeah, that tracks for the American medical system.
Yeah, that's about right.
Well, assuming you are American, of course, but you know.
Yeah, this is why since about the 1990s there have been various layers of laws about working hours in the UK.
Yes, but that's because you people have these communist things called workers' rights and protections.
Yes.
Also, our constituencies are just small enough that the members of Parliament can be found in person.
Yes.
Quite easily and complained at.
Mm-hmm.
And just for context to our non-American viewers, I moved almost 100 miles. I still have the same federal representative.
Yeah.
Part of that is due to gerrymandering.
Yeah.
But also, I still have the same federal representative, and I moved almost 100 miles away.
Yeah.
And we're not talking senator, I take it.
No, we're talking representative.
Yeah. With Michael Cooch, last year you said you hoped the Shipshape Australia backer orders would ship around December. Any update on likely shipping date? Some of them have seemed to have shipped. Not all of them seem to have got where they're supposed to go. So we're working on that, let's say. Any time scale on the Trafalgar game? We're working on venue. We've got a good lead. We're talking it out. We're going to work out where we can fit round diaries.
Trafalgar game? Ooh, columning treat.
Yeah.
Oh, you're expected to come to that. But nicest way, you're coming to that, and probably I'm going to see if I can get Kate Jameson there as well to umpire us.
There's a lot of.
You will also be asked questions.
There's a lot of things There's a lot of things I am seemingly now expected to come to.
Doc, no.
Yes.
I just followed Jameson on Blue Sky, and if I see a post that says, "Yes, my car caught on fire with my grandma and my dog in it,"
What?
I'm supposed to go and record this, I might cry.
She's lovely and she's very brave. The fact that her life, every time she was supposed to come on bilge pumps, went to absolute anything, will leave to one side.
And of course, her luck didn't change when she tried to come on my show either. Unfortunately, seems like the curse follows her wherever she goes.
Maybe the
same thing happened to her with Bruships.
Where he goes.
Yeah.
Because the problem is that, and of course, it denied us the meeting of Foxo and Kate Jameson. That would have been glorious if they had met.
We are going to try and arrange this soon. We are going to try and arrange this again soon.
Oh my god, that's gonna be.
Although, actually, the thing is, we seem to be successful when we arrange to meet in person, and it's when we're trying to do stuff digitally online that things go wrong.
Well, that's.
There's a simple to that, and it's called, I think, about equidistant for quite a lot of us and you, and near to her is the Yeovilton.
Yeah.
Okay. But if it's any consolation, Michael Couch, I have not received my coin either. So you're not alone.
I've heard from some in the UK have received their coins. One person in America seems to have received their coin, but others haven't.
I just saw.
So I have no idea what's going on with the various systems of parcel movement.
Somebody said track. Jonathan over on Twitch says that they asked Drac, and that he said that he's rate limited by his local post office.
Has he maxed out his post office account again for every month?
The verbiage that Jonathan has used is due to his local post office not accepting volumes.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
This could be what's causing the trouble. He has maxed out again his post office. He is the only person I know who is sometimes getting to the point of, right then, if you go any higher as a normal person, you have to start getting your own franking machine and various other things.
Yeah.
Basically, he's turning into he's almost it's almost level that he's got to start paying for a commercial relationship with the post office in the UK.
You call it a frank?
Yes, it's when you frank your own stamps.
But you call it franking?
What? I've never heard of this.
Yeah.
This is a new one on me.
Yeah. It's a franking machine.
French.
Yeah.
Then again, I'm not familiar with postal terms, so that's not surprising.
Well, it's when you get the kind of, instead of a stamp, you get the kind of automated zip through barcode-y type thing on the mail.
Yeah.
This is my ex, addressed to my ex, but which I need to pop forward, but that sort of thing.
Yeah, but
So
Jonathan, that's Dutch.
Yeah. So organisations will have their own ones, because I've worked in at least one post room when I was a student and stuff. So it's just the way that you pay for, and you kind of pay as you pass the things through. Yeah.
All right.
Although it doesn't work with large packages, but you can print your own labels for those.
Dr. Clark.
But even then, you can still max things out.
if
Yeah,
you
I
could,
suspect it maybe like frank pledge and things. I'm not sure. Franking.
Mm.
It sounds very Germanic.
Hmm.
I think rather than frank.
I think,
Yeah, it's Frank.
I think
It's Frank rather than Frank. Yeah.
we imported it from the Germans because we'd always done by stamps, and then when they set it up, set up the machines. The machines the first were brought in from the UK were machines which came from Germany because they had it rather than stamps. I think, or something. There was some fun history of it. I remember once someone explaining it to me in detail and me going, interesting.
Dr. Clark,
And it,
Yes, Bruno?
if you could do me a quick favor and go into your
And?
streamer bot, you're going to see
Yes.
two Q release actions, .10 and 1.0. Disable .10, please.
Okay.
And while he's working on that, I'll read off Matthew Blarian's question. What would the
Ow! Being squashed by Poodle!
Yeah,
All right.
Oh.
I am amused because I'm sorry.
What would the Cold
Oh.
War Royal Navy have looked like had the UK purchased strategic autonomy after the Suez Crisis?
The
This is
problem.
something I'm too American to understand.
the
I'm going to go
prob-
get more iron through.
The problem you have with that as a concept is that this basically relies on a flawed view of what would have been the outcome of a successful Suez Crisis. It's not that the UK would have gotten strategic autonomy if the Suez Crisis had succeeded.
Oh.
It's just that the Suez Crisis would have succeeded. It doesn't gain the UK any more or less leeway than they already had.
No. The question is, what would the Cold War Royal Navy have looked like had the UK pursued strategic autonomy after the Suez Crisis?
Oh,
If instead of going, okay,
We're
So
going to be the
that's the question.
anti-submarine force of the Atlantic.
instead of going to be the ASW, if we'd gone, we'd have had to abandon things like the British Army of the Rhine and go full Navy, full Air Force. That would have literally had to be in our policy, with the Army becoming a UK large. It's going to still have quite significant ground forces, but they're not going to be based in Germany.
yeah.
They're going to be based. Oh, did you literally get me off my seat so you could lick the handle? Because you must have done it immediately, Pluff.
Yes.
Pluff.
Yes.
Could
The problem.
you see them? Could you see the British going for a kind of Commonwealth Corps or something instead of the British Army of the Rhine? So putting in with the Canadians and maybe trying to pull the Aussies and people in.
The problem you've got with that, the Commonwealth was never that.
The trouble is, are they going? The thing is, are the rest of the Commonwealth nations prepared to go in with that?
Yeah, that's
the thing. There are. You might well see. If it's going to sound strange, I could see it becoming a defense synergy whereby Britain, Australia, Canada, etc., buy from a common pool of equipment. Where the British government make it very heavily very heavy for them to actually, be part of the join up and sort of very in their favour to work within the British system. They'd still be competing with America for that, but there is a thing of America might not. It's going to depend on who's in power, what approach the Americans take on it, but it could well be the Americans go, do we treat Britain and France like they historically treated France during those years? Because if Britain's still technically a member of NATO, they're just strategically autonomous within NATO. Then they're annoying, but it's better they're in than out.
Yeah.
If France, France is let to be what France is. So,
I think the thing is, fundamentally, France would actually have had things gone hot. France would have had a much harder time staying aloof.
I mean, to be fair,
when the Germans rolled through the gap than the British would have done.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, France. It's important to remember that France didn't withdraw from NATO. All they did was withdraw from the joint strategic planning. Like, that's an important thing to.
They did withdraw from NATO.
No, they did not. They withdrew from the strategic.
I'm gonna wedge in here and thank you, Jake Grant, for the 25 pounds over on YouTube.
Ah, very
Yeah.
good. But I'm fairly certain that I'm sure I've heard it. Like, it's a common misconception that they fully withdrew from NATO, but they actually didn't. They withdrew from basically all the joint strategic planning, but they still intended to honour their alliance commitments should anything hit the fan.
Well, the thing was, they withdrew from, and I know there is a technical, there's a technical people go, they technically didn't withdraw. They said they still honour their commitments, but they withdrew from all the integrated military command. They withdrew from all the various issues within it. In which case, they were de facto not part of the NATO forces. They weren't assisting in any of the NATO peacetime deterrence operations.
Yeah.
And because of their pursuing of independent logistics and independent systems, it did mean that, frankly, most people viewed them as logistically about as useful in a NATO war as well. Honestly, they were considered next to useless. Because as good as well trained as their forces were, they were not part of any of the joint logistics, any of the joint structures at all. So they'd have to be completely independently supporting their forces. So you can only deploy them, basically go, right, this is a French sector, you have to hold it yourself, and we can't send anyone else to assist you because they can't use your logistics.
Yeah.
And you can't go and assist anyone else because you can't use their logistics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a case of, whilst in name, you are right, they didn't. In fact, anyone who dealt with it basically meant they were...
Oh, that didn't
Yeah.
last, it didn't last too long, though, did it? They sort of slid back in the 70s. Gradually.
Not really.
They adopted standard NATO cartridges, didn't they? And the same net.
No, not really.
Really?
They managed to go for something which was theoretically similar to NATO military cartridge, but was French measurements rather than NATO measurements.
Aye.
Saying they weren't using stand mags.
I'm saying that their 7.62 was not everyone else's 7.62.
Did they at least get in line for 5.56? I'm gonna take that as a no.
Oh.
It is the French 7 points. I can't remember how to do numbers in French. So, 7.62. It is bespoke and it is beautiful and it is handmade and needs to be appreciated. And you open the ammo crate and you have to let it breathe for at least half an hour before you can use the ammunition. Yeah.
So,
it's all fun.
But yeah, if Britain chooses to pursue more strategic autonomy, that's going to be a bit of a problem and is not going to go over well with some of the rest of NATO, because despite what people think, the British Army of the Rhine was actually a very valued part of the deterrence force in West Germany.
Yeah, it was, but the thing is, if the British are basically pursuing that, then strategic autonomy means you don't want to be basing your such forces in Germany, because then they are dependent upon the Germans. So that's part of the reason you draw, and you start pushing. To be honest, what becomes the de facto operation is that the Americans might be forced into a scenario whereby they have to accept the British and the French carrier forces taking a far bigger lead in the North Atlantic and them redirecting funding to their army to have larger land forces in Germany.
What I would actually suspect is that you'd see a variation of that. I don't think you'd see a redirection of funding to the land forces because, to be blunt, the US just has to basically commit to sending those forces to Germany. They don't need to increase funding. What you're probably going to see is instead the British, not so much the French, but the British going, look, we'll watch China and the Russian Pacific Fleet for you. We'll have our carriers out east watching them, which means you can focus on dropping the hammer on the Russian Northern Fleet with your carriers and commit to keeping the sea lanes open.
No, the strategic autonomy doesn't mean we have to leave NATO. We could be like the French, but in many ways it's almost easier for naval forces to join in than it is for them to think. So we could say, look, we'll deal with the Russian. The North Atlantic Russians are ours. You go deal the rest of them elsewhere. we will deal. Our carriers will cover the North Atlantic
The
fleet.
problem is, even a strategically autonomous UK with more funding for the Navy is worryingly close to being a peer opponent for the Soviet Northern Fleet. It's not the
Oh, yeah.
crushing overmatch that is the United States Atlantic Forces.
Have you met the Royal Navy Submarine Service?
I have, and I am very familiar with what they may or may not be capable of. But again, I would also point
No,
out...
you're not, because none of us are, because they don't tell us.
Hellbreak. Oh, good. Okay, one thing. I'm going to comment on Hellbreak Loose's statement, and then I'm going to make a pet peeve comment that I have seen by some miscreant at USS Wisconsin. The fact that the FAL looks like it takes Stan mags, but doesn't. It infuriates me on multiple levels. But also, if anyone tells you that as soon as like the M16 and the M4 and that whole AR family platform came out and we got the standard mags in NATO, that they stopped issuing clips to people, they're wrong. It's called stripper clips, and they are designed to explicitly work with stand mags so you can reload them easier.
Oh,
So whoever decided to graffiti on one of the plaques at Wisconsin for one of the arms lockers, not only are you a meathead, you're also wrong. And every time I go there, I see that, and it annoys me.
Look, in the nicest way, me and Dan will have. Dan has the experience here of walking around with two people who also find this kind of thing incredibly annoying. Walking around various ships in Australia and Canada and the various parts of Scandinavia with us. How often do you have to push us away from these things, Dan?
What the misinformation boards?
Yes.
Honestly, you're not as bad as going around with my late friend Joe, who had done his master's in museum studies and had wanted to work in museums, although ended up at the National Archives. That was more of a fun because he not only critiqued the information on the signs, but would also critique the design and layout of the signs in terms of the styles and the way they were presenting the information as being poor choices. Some of the slightly less well visited bits of the British Museum, for instance, drew some ire for that. So, he could hit them with on both topics. Yeah. You and Drunk are nothing. Nothing on that.
Them's fighting words, son.
Oh.
All right.
To be fair, we do tend to cover for each other as well, and to kind of try and push the other one moving out. Hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should the replacement for the Skjold class corvette be a surface effect craft or a conventional hull design? Looking at their wiki page, they're probably going to keep them as surface effect, ground effect craft, unless they radically change either their armament or their attack profiles.
The Skjold class, of course, are the Royal Norwegian Navy's vessels. They have been in commission since 1999. They are currently talking, I think, about their replacements. They're quite cool little ships, and I have to say we did love them when we saw some out in Norway. I would say the main problem I think for the Norwegians,
I need to remind myself what they look.
The main problem they have at the moment is A, they don't have enough of them, and B, they're now upgrading them to have the things like not just naval strike missiles, but also various other systems added in. But the thing is, they're only upgrading 4 ships. They're upgrading them until 2030. They need to replace them. I think it's going to be a case of I'd like a similar profile vessel, but they've also... There's only so much you can do in a hull, which is 274 tons. There's only so much you can do in that size hull, and I think they're probably going to have to push up to 350, 400 tons for what they're talking about for the next generation. And I'm not sure if you can keep the same speed going. I do know they can do in a calm sea up to 60 knots. Or something over 60 knots. They are very, very fast.
The wiki data says more than 60.
Yes.
And links to www.navaltechnology.com, which I don't think is a website I'm particularly familiar with, but never mind.
It's a good one. British battleships, British dreadnoughts. If you want a good history of British battleship construction, British warship construction, there's a fairly good series. There's Norman Freeman's books, of course, but there's also things like the books by John Roberts, which I always highly recommend. This is the Second World War one, but there's also other ones as well. So basically, if you type John Roberts, usually that's one of my tricks I use, is sometimes, if I notice a good author on topic, I type their name into Amazon or into the books, various bookstore, online bookstores, and see what comes up. Right then, so... 1931. Would I be right to think that if you gave through technology the US industrial advantage to everyone, that the British pre-existing industrial supremacy raised to unassailable levels? Okay, so I think what you're saying is, if you give the American tech, and considering Britain, let's put this probably, I think, knowing your questions, we're talking about the World War One period, World War War Two period. So the British were probably about the second greatest, depending on the time, we're talking exactly the greatest to the second greatest in the world in terms of technological capacity. So you add in the Americans, who are either the second to the greatest, again, depending on the time in this exact period, because they're transitioning in this period over it. In the nicest way, if you look in World War One era, Britain is still ahead in industrial capacity for most World War One, and then it's sort of going and then after World War Two, it basically accelerates away. But, you're talking the period where they sort of keep overlapping, and depending on which particular area you're looking at, food production, the Americans are always way ahead of the Brits. But, those sort of things. But it's depending what you're talking about. If you add the American, therefore, onto the British, do you make it unassailable? Well, you've basically taken the two biggest ones and combined them into one.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, if you take, if you give me the body of the young George Clooney, and I get to keep my mind, but I also get, some of the suaveness of James Bond chucked in again. You've made an unassailable creature which can just take over the world through charisma.
Yeah, but
it's just brilliant.
Yeah, but it also isn't surprising
and naval history.
Yeah, but it also isn't surprising to anyone who was looking at that outcome from the outside. I would also just like to give a quick thing here. The thing with Britain and America as we go through the 19th century and into the 20th is that Britain is ahead so long as it retains the advantage of concentrated industry and the empire. The reason the US starts to pull ahead in a rapid way is that it can get domestically from the vast wealth of the United States of America and the American continent what Britain has to get through its massive empire, which is always going to be less efficient than a concentrated industrial power with everything all on one continent supplied by a very robust railway network, with all of those states not seeing themselves as colonies, but as core parts of the United States of America, with everyone willing to give their all for it. This is the thing.
Lee has been spending enough time with me. He knows he has to bring up infrastructure.
And this is why the US pulls ahead. It's basically the real pull ahead area is about 1890 to 1920. That period where the US has consolidated everything.
That isn't the pull ahead area. That is not the pull ahead area. That's where they managed to consolidate everything. They don't actually manage to pull ahead really until they're in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. The reason is because whilst they have the raw ingredients set up then, it's actually getting those raw ingredients to work together. Because whilst you don't have states arguing with each other, you still have states arguing with each other. You've gotten to a level where they no longer argue the federal government, they still argue with each other like anything.
Yeah,
That causes troubles.
And as soon as Britain loses that the imperial market and the riches of empire, any hope of, to be fair, any hope of competing was lost when the US basically went to the moon and just decided to go to the moon. And there was very little the British could do to keep up. But the British were still like, okay, the US is going to the moon, but we can stay where we are. We can be second rank, like just behind the US. We're never going to match them anymore, but we can stay behind them. And then the Second World War happens, and the aftermath of the Second World War. And then they go.
Nice way. The Americans did not go to the moon in the 1920s and 30s. That's the 1960s.
He was talking metaphorically. If I can get
metaphorically, that didn't happen in the 20s and 30s. The Americans had the potential, but again, there's a reason they're building a huge amount of infrastructure in the 20s and 30s. It's because they're still having to build up the infrastructure to support that. Support that growth.
The problem that you've got is by the 1920s and 30s, that infrastructure is in place. All the main lines have been built. The canals are all extant. Heavy industry is in place. The problem is that the 20s and 30s is America going to the moon. Because the problem we've got is that in terms of GDP and GDP per capita it isn't. But if you look at raw industrial output, steel, coal, iron, manufactured goods, America is just off in the
point. Well, that's the point where the US still has room for expansion, whereas the UK, especially as just the UK, it's kind of maxed out and it ossified in the 20s and 30s to some extent. And so, whereas, and there wasn't particularly growth elsewhere in the empire, so it kind of was, I mean, if you were being polite, you might say it was resting on its laurels, but it wasn't doing it deliberately. It was kind of wallowing in its own filth.
I suppose it was refusing to accept the realities of the situation would be the polite way to say it.
No, it was
okay. When we talk about empire in this period, again, you've got to remember the Canadian, the Australian economies, South African economies were all going through quite big booms in this period. Even Britain was doing a lot of recapitalisation of industry. One of the things often forgotten about Britain's industrial figures at this point was it took time for them to turn the factories back from armaments factories they turned them in World War One into other factories in World War Two and build up. And there is a lot of hubris and other issues going on, Georgy Zhukov and all these things, but you have to remember some of the problems you had going into the 20s and 30s. The British are still pretty much... Let me put it this way. The British are the world policemen in this period. Still. Very much.
And that's the other thing which the Americans have got going for them is they don't have the big commitments to make anymore. They don't have...
I would just like to say that while I am in full
also,
agreement...
Georgy, a nice way, China is in the middle of a war at that point in 1930s. So 1920. So, nice way, they're being invaded, fighting all sorts of stuff with Japan, internal civil wars, etc. The figures that are given for the Chinese GDP, not even the Chinese believe them in that period.
Yeah, I would also point out that...
And as for Russia and the Soviet Union at this point, again, civil war, recovering from it, and again, there's all the problems going on.
Forced command economy, currency not meaning what it means in other countries. Like, the Soviet GDP in this period is just magic at this point.
This on international level?
No, it's a case of... One of the interesting things is that Britain still retains quite a lot of its power in the world, and its real terms power, and being the still the first among equals. You have to remember that one of the problems you have today is that people want to compare things to superpowers. And superpowers are very much a product of the post-World War II age of nuclear weapons, but also that level of infrastructure, that level of technology that can support that global reach.
Oh yeah, like
What we're talking about in the period prior to World War II, we're talking about global powers. Global powers were always more close together than superpowers superpowers are, etc. And that's it's a different scenario.
Yeah.
So Britain, when we're talking about Britain being the leading power in the 1920s and 30s, they're the first amongst equals. They're not a superpower.
Yeah.
And please don't. There's no one saying they're a superpower here.
No.
They're first among equals because of their basing capabilities, because of the production capabilities they do have across the empire as well as in Britain, and because of the real size forces. It's a very different framework than what we deal with today.
Yeah.
And that's one of the troubles you get in this conversation is people automatically rework back today to the 1800s. The amount of times I see articles which say, Britain, the world's first superpower, and I go,
no.
Oh, good Lord, no, because that wasn't the situation at all. Britain was a global power first, probably.
Yeah.
You can argue that. Spain would try and claim it was.
I would also like to point out
but we're talking a very different scenario.
Yeah, like for most of the colonial period and up to basically World War II, it's the Great Power period. You have your first among equals, but a coalition of 2 to 3 of your rivals will topple you. Whereas, as happened with France in the Napoleonic Wars. But if you're talking about the post-war world, no coalition of the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Japan is going to topple either the Soviets or the US. It's just, they are that far ahead. They have leapfrogged, both powers have leapfrogged that far ahead in terms of manpower, capital, military investment, that they are no longer great powers, they are superpowers.
Possibly, maybe.
Of course.
Word in edgewise?
Yes, of course.
Another advantage that the U.S.
As our token American, you can have a word in edgewise.
Hey, whoa, token American. She's our excellent American.
When you're ready, I'll talk.
That accent. Do it again. It was funny.
One other advantage that the U.S. has is that, unlike the U.K., anything it does not have in North America is probably in South America. And if it needs to get it, especially as you get closer to and past the 1940s, it doesn't have a lot of peers or local near peers on the Gulf of Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, some of the South American powers still have capital assets. How combat capable are those capital assets going to be against even a standard?
The only real concern for the US in terms of capital assets are the Rivadavias, and that's solely down to the fact that they stand even a minor chance of resisting 14-inch shell fire with their belt armor.
Some of those are on the Pacific coast, which is irrelevant for Gulf of Mexico travel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things of once you start looking into it, you go again. The only major power who actually can compete with the Americans in South America, or rather, who the Americans have to compete with in South America, is the British, because they and the Americans have been enforcing the Monroe Doctrine for so long.
Yep.
And basically, the British have been using the Monroe Doctrine as the Monroe Doctrine is so fun for the British because the British go, you can't get involved because the Americans say you can't, and everyone turns around and go, but you're already involved. Yes, but we're already here.
Yeah, we're here. See, we called dibs, and the Americans were.
We were just here trading, and then we have the global navy. It goes everywhere to go and say hello to people and remind them that if they don't be nice to the British flagged ships, their cities get shelled because their population mostly lives around the coast, particularly the ruling bits.
As I was talking about with Japan the other day and with Togo Hayashiro, his first wartime service was again when the British were in the conflict between the Anglo-Satsuma conflict, when a British merchant was killed by some local nobles, probably because he managed to muck up and get it wrong. Please note, I'm not sitting here defending that particular merchant. He does seem to have been a bit of a twit. But it's a case of how do I put this? The British actually, level the city because they're not. The reason not pay they level the city is it because they're upset at a merchant? No, it's because they demanded reparations. Reparations were agreed. The reparations weren't paid on time. The Royal Navy turned up like any good debt collector did and leveled the city.
Okay, I'm going to knock this one on the head because we've been chewing on it for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Hey, we did a good job.
What is the most insane invention or idea you found in the archives that you can talk about?
I have no dog
The
in
most
this fight.
insane one that I've seen somebody else find in the archives was the United States Army classified anti-tank rock.
What?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Anti-tank rock.
And it was classified secret, too.
What? Was it just
Don't
a
take this wrong way.
massive boulder?
No, it was actually a boulder, a rock the size of a human head.
And what in particular made it anti-tank?
You were supposed to throw it in the tank treads to cause the tank to throw track. Chieftain's got a video on it. Well, he has a video that touches on it.
Anti-tank rock.
Yes.
Don't get.
Opposed to the Royal Navy anti-tank, anti-missile rock.
Yes, but that was the mountain.
It's just a question of scale.
Oh, that's very funny. That's...
I think the fact that you guys are only vaguely the size of Alabama sometimes goes to your heads, and you have to make up for it elsewhere.
We prefer about slightly smaller than Oregon, which I think is what the CIA World Factbook describes us as.
Look, we've done some even weirder stuff than that. Let's be honest. We had the anti-tank stick at one point.
Yes, size isn't everything, ladies and gentlemen.
And
hey, at least you didn't stick a RPG round to the end of a stick and then go charge.
Oh
no! What you did was it was for the anti-tank dogs, so that you could distract them, and you threw the stick, and then the anti-tank dogs that the Russians might deploy would chase after the stick instead of attacking your tank.
Yeah.
So it's an anti-tank, anti-dog, anti-tank. I don't really.
Anti-dog tank? Is it an anti-dog tank? Is that where we are now?
that was what the Soviets had. They would train dogs to go and eat underneath with bombs on their backs. Next question. If Drac is the god emperor of naval history, then what positions are the members of the ship-shape crew hold, and who is the largest spread of naval dissemination? Would that be bashing?
I'm going to be honest.
Seeing as I seem to spend half my life organizing everyone and putting everything together and putting on the organization, that probably makes me Gilliman if we're in this scenario. If Drac is the god emperor.
Fleet is basically well, I am basically Alpharius and Omegon at the same time. I am the weird one who likes French ships and also dispenses misinformation without meaning to occasionally. But also is liked by the majority of the rest of the panel, at least until he turns traitor and runs away laughing hysterically. But then he comes back, and then he goes away again, and then he comes back.
I think I'm just a random servitor.
No, you're not a servitor, but you're a random apothecary. You're a random apothecary who showed up to this meeting of the Primarchs. Like, how did I get here?
No. Dan is chief apothecary.
No, I would say Dan probably.
Oh, Petch, that's cruel.
What did he say?
Dan does.
You're Mortarian.
Dan does more than that.
I'm not Mortarian.
Could well be. Who said that? I was thinking, actually, if Dan was anyone, and this is possibly going to get me into trouble, but,
boy.
I do have a scenario for this. I'd say Dan is the most like Jagatai Khan.
Really?
Has a strong independent streak. Wanders off random places. Occasionally gets lost, but usually turns up again when he needs to.
Yeah, I could see that.
Also, does that mean I get to say it, or all of you get to say, God?
Well, no, neither. None of us get to say it because that's
usually
Star Trek. That's
I don't know. It's a good one. I'm still trying to work out who Garrus is, though.
let me think.
Probably Vulcan.
Drac, okay, although one question I do have: if Drac is the God Emperor, does that mean that somebody like Norman Friedman or Andrew Lambert is Malkador?
Oh, Norman Freeman as Malkador. That's just perfect.
No, it'll be Andrew Lambert.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely
dear.
Andrew Lambert. Norman Friedman's the lion.
Oh god, that's funny. I thought.
I think that might be the model he has.
Well, no, I thought. I thought
to
Charles Dance was the lion, just because Charles Dance, the man, literally could be the lion. He has the voice for it and the face.
I'm still working out what Runon is. I think probably she's one of the Sisters of Battle, but I'm not sure which one.
The head cannon is the overarching one. That's what I think.
Most likely.
Seems like a fairly good.
Do they have tech priests?
Well, she
Sisters
could
of
also.
Battle? I
She
think
could
they're
also
all...
be a she could also be a Custodes.
Yeah.
Who's Horus?
I'm also.
Horus? Where's Horus? Point me at Horus.
But no, first very quickly before we get people saying it. I am very glad, and I'm going to make my position clear. I am glad that they've actually admitted that they can be female custodians because it makes perfect sense. They're custom crafted, they're custom crafted gene warriors, and to not give yourself access to half the available population to custom craft would just be silly. Because it's not like the Space Marines where you need that male genes to enable mass production. The custodians are not mass produced.
Especially when you are brain fart, when you are using them as a means to buy loyalty from the powerful families. So
taking their daughters can be as effective as taking their sons. Yeah.
Who's
I
Erebus?
would say,
do we have an Erebus?
No. Yes, we do. I blame Foxo for Erebus. Erebus is Foxo or Dragon.
I would say again,
Dragon is Morgar and Foxo is Erebus.
No, Foxo's already picked who she is. Foxo has already picked who she is. Foxo is Siphius Kane.
I'm
not sure. I'm not sure what that makes. I'm not sure what that makes Dragon though.
Jurgen? Yeah, it would be Jurgen.
And we have Dan. What do we think the other Dan is?
I haven't read anything.
Also, I love the presumption that I'm a member of Ship Shape. I don't feel that fits, but okay.
Probably perhaps Ferrus Manus, because I could see him doing mad. It's kind of like I'm a bit, the god. It's like I feel for Drac in some ways being the God Emperor is a bit limiting, and also gives him far too much paperwork, which he would absolutely hate. But we'll leave that to one side. This is why there's no competition of me going, I want to be the God Emperor. No, I can avoid the paperwork. I will take Gilliman. I will do the paperwork under sufferance, but I can avoid it as Gilliman if I want to, and go and fight people. Emperors can't avoid it.
Rule number one: the Emperor doesn't do paperwork. He has other people for that. The whole point of being the Emperor.
You want to bet?
No, the whole point of being the Emperor is you go into the palace. The moment
the buck stops with you, you have paperwork coming for you.
Well, yes, that's true, but you literally tell the people to do it. Say, I'm going back to my experiments with the webway. Shh.
Dragon, you're not sleepy enough to be Johnson. Seneca would like a more expansive answer on his question versus because I completely derailed it with the anti-tank rock.
Oh, what is the most invention or idea you found in the archives? I would say the most weird one I found over the years. Various versions of pop-up pillboxes.
Ooh, pop-up
And the various mechanisms they come with for them. And it's always an idea. There's always one of the things you have to remember is the British regularly flirt fortifying the British Isles. Regularly flirt with it.
We are still,
and regularly it comes back to this. This is going to be far too expensive to be sensible.
Yeah.
Let's just put the money into a fleet.
That just sounds,
usually that's what comes.
That just sounds like a really crummy tank.
You have no idea how bad it can get.
It was basically.
There were literally some ideas of some tractors covered in with concrete to make them into mobile pillboxes.
Bob Semple lives again.
No, Bob Semple was part of a theme thing.
Nukes heated by chickens. That's
uniquely British.
No, so you'd hope, but actually that was felt to be quite a good idea by NATO.
Oh God, you'd have a NATO standardized chicken.
Yes, I know. Nightshade system. The RAF did use the concrete tractors in World War II as part of their airfield defences.
I'm just trying to work out what would happen, because the poor Bersaglieri of the Italians in NATO would find themselves the butt of so many jokes about the standard chicken for their hats.
Yep.
That's just yeah.
To an extent, for the British, it does make sense to put pillboxes around the UK, especially if you're worried about being invaded, if you're worried about enemy airborne invasion. Putting in some wires, putting in some pillboxes makes sense. Because honestly, the best time to kill paratroopers is when they're floating down.
Yeah.
When they're floating down and you can just machine gun the sky, that's the best time to kill them. Either that or when you know they're landing on Malta. Because the amount of people I see keep claiming, no, they could have invaded Malta by paratrooper, and I go there! Have a look at the fields, and then ask yourself, why do they not do much parachute jumping on Malta in a beautiful Mediterranean island with absolutely brilliant climate that should be perfect for it?
Mm-hmm. And you may find out.
They could invade Malta with thousands of paratroopers. I mean, the real problem would be that they would rapidly overwhelm the hospital setup with all the people there with broken legs and other broken bits just from the landings before you even get to what happens when the Maltese get to them. Because the Maltese will have been told by the British, because let's face it, the British are nasty, sneaky people, that we will have pointed out how anti-Catholic the Nazis were.
Mm-hmm.
At which point the ultra-Catholic Maltese, vast majority of the population, especially the little grandmas, will do unspeakable things to them that are akin to what the people of Crete did to the German paratroopers, only wholesale. Because
the worst thing for you in landing on a field in Malta is you landing on top of a roof and walking in to find yourself, on about 3 Maltese grandmas going, "Excuse me, you've disturbed our game of gin rummy." Good luck, God bless, and what happens to you will probably be later featured in the very small, but always possible to expand, non-Canadian section of the war crimes rules.
Yep.
Remember, it's never a crime the first time. It's only a crime after people have found out exactly what happened, go, never want that happening to them, and then make it a crime.
Oh.
Alrighty. Ethan Yang, can you tell us more about the Chinese interest in the Kirov class that you mentioned last time? What would a 21st century Chinese heavy missile cruiser look like?
To be
VLS. A
Wait,
lot of
wait a
VLS.
few years and we'll probably
lot of
never
VLS.
see one.
VLS.
to be honest, you're looking at a ship that their current. Well, to be frank, given that they're planning a larger surface combatant than their current largest destroyer, which although they call it a destroyer, everyone sat there going, "That's a cruiser-sized combatant," even in modern terminology, and you want to go bigger
Yeah.
than that. And
Yeah.
they're basically clawing their way back towards having Kirov-sized surface combatants to work with their carriers. Like they're on their way to it.
There are some reasons for it. A, for the Chinese, especially without the global infrastructure and alliances of powers who are of a similar level to them who can sustain their fleet. They're looking at if they're having ships operating further away, they need to be able to take more firepower with them because they need to be self-sustaining for that much longer to have to give them a chance of getting back. So there are reasons for building bigger escorts with far deeper missile loadouts and far more capabilities.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that for the Chinese, they don't want to have their carriers wandering around the world. You have to remember the Chinese are definitely not looking to become a global policeman. They're definitely not looking to step up to that to being that role at this precise time because that doesn't fit with their view of how the world should be run.
Yeah.
What they are looking for is something which is going to give them presence and significant presence. And again, let's be honest, look at what the Kirovs did for the Russians. They gave them so much presence, the Americans had to reactivate the Iowa class.
And of course, the Kirovs are excellent ships to, because the Kirovs are not central to the Russian Bastion defense plan. So the Kirovs can, with a task group, leave the Northern Fleet or the Pacific Fleet and go and do things. Like,
yeah.
Even during wartime, the plan for the Kirovs was to go and be annoying or to help lead amphibious assaults in Norway. Because they can do that because even if you lose them, the bastions will not be compromised.
Yeah, they were useful. Please note before anyone. There is one thing I need to actually. Seeing Dan Protestant Cameron. This is Iron Brew. It is a soft drink. Once again, I've had people commenting, going, "You're getting drunk the whole time." No, this is my personality sober.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if that offends you. This is me I don't drink alcohol.
The only person.
I'm the only one of the ship-shape crew who doesn't.
I do.
Yes. Yeah. The only person who gets drunk regularly during his streams is me. I am known for it. Drunk Fleet is a meme for a reason.
I mean, I kind of do, but that's only because I'm a complete lightweight, so it only takes me one or two beers to potentially get tiddly.
Steve, there's a debate as to whether the Chinese are planning for the next generation cruiser to be nuclear powered. Because one of the things that we've noticed is they are planning on their aircraft carriers being nuclear powered, a next generation, not the one they're currently building, but the one after that to be nuclear powered.
And it wouldn't surprise me.
What they've done with everything else is every other thing they've tested this out before they've done it.
Yeah.
They haven't yet tested out. So building the next generation of large cruiser as nuclear powered would be a way to test that out.
Or more accurately, the first thing they call an actual cruiser, because it wouldn't surprise me if they call the. Oh no, sorry, they don't do that because they consider it an imperialist term.
No, please note, what I'm saying is that China doesn't want to be world policeman. That's very different than saying they don't want to usurp the US. They don't want to be world policemen. They don't want the cost. Everyone knows you need a world policeman, but it's kind of like America in the 1920s and 30s. America didn't want the cost of being world policeman. That's the reason why Britain stays in the position it does in the world as basically the number one power amongst equals. Because no one else wants the role. So Britain is the role, has the role, and so therefore, by default, is the more powerful and most powerful, the first amongst equals, because it has that role.
Yeah.
Countries actually don't want that role. They normally have to be pushed into taking it. Even post-World War II, when the Americans were going for superpower status, for a while, the Americans were already debating how anti-imperialist they should be, because they knew if the British withdrew, that would mean they would have to step up and be the world policeman.
Yeah.
There were some who did believe that the world would police itself, but very many who were not that naive believe it worked out very quickly it was going to get expensive.
It also
And
removes.
it did.
Yeah.
And it has been.
It also removes one of the key
Cheers,
factors in
Stafford.
China's strategy, which is fleet concentration in the event of a war.
Yeah.
Their ability to concentrate.
If you're world policeman, you.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Dr. Clark.
Yeah. If you're world policeman, you can't concentrate at the same speed. You have to have your forces dispersed in peacetime around the world.
Yeah. Which the US has had to spend a lot of money to keep the fleet to both have a concentration and do world policemen, which they've just about been able to do. Whereas China can now build up a fleet that can stay at home and be a massive stick, which the US goes. It's one of the reasons why the US has been going, yes, carriers from our allies in Japan and Britain, which means we can have more of a stick to hit China with.
Well, it's
Okay.
also that, I mean, it feels like the Japanese are. Sorry, the Chinese are at risk of building another German high seas fleet equivalent.
Totally didn't just realize that I was muted for the last 5 minutes. Anyway,
the difference in this case is that unlike with the German Empire, where China, yes, China is a continental power, but they're just so far ahead of their rivals. Their army is already so massively overkill against anyone they share a border with, apart from possibly the Russians and maybe India. But the border with India is so horrible that trying to fight a major conventional war there would be suicidal for both sides anyway.
There is a reason they're still sticking. There is a reason just beyond diplomacy they're keeping the sticks and the stones for those fights.
Yeah, but what I was...
the logistics.
Churchill tanks would make it up those mountains.
But to get back to the point I was driving at, it's unlike the Imperial German comparison. The Chinese can, and we see they are downsizing their army, up-teching it to bring it in line with Western-style force compositions. Not quite the same, because they're doing it their own way, but they're headed towards a less conscription-based force. And, well, they're still going to use conscription, but they're trying to professionalize it, bring the overall bloat of the force down, and as in so doing, even though they are up-teching the force, the overall costs are coming down, and where's that money going? The Navy and the Air Force. The tools they will need to fight the United States, which is ironically enough in a quasi-German empire situation itself, despite being the rank 1 power, because they have to maintain the Navy, maintain the Air Force, maintain a large force overseas to deal with the Middle East, to deal with Europe, and all three of the United States Armed Forces are all convinced that if they don't get the funding they need, the next major war will find them lacking.
I want to point one thing out and address something for Olex K. Olex K, you can see the world police at work by the fact that the majority of the world, if you go into a supermarket, there's still goods on the shelves. If there was no functioning world police, you would not have the level and reliability of maritime trade that you do now.
World police isn't the same as there being no conflict. World police is that the world is still functioning.
And
we can tell when it breaks down, because that's when we do have major problems in the world economic.
The other thing that you can see too is that you have Beijing right now seems to be focused on maintaining, gaining, or mostly gaining, a industrial and technological edge over the rest of the world. And they are trying to do that as best as they can through, for lack of any better phrasing, foreign influence operations. The problem is what they're going to find is that if, as part of those foreign influence operations, they take the legs out from underneath the U.S. economy, the U.S. is no longer going to be able to afford to maintain a global presence to keep things like piracy and terrorism down on the sea lanes, which means China's not going to be able to sell their physical goods.
It's one of the reasons why you see the Chinese, despite the fact they are technically rivals with the US, committing to operations in the Red Sea. Despite the fact that they're technically aligned with, the Russians, quote-unquote, which isn't actually true. You see a Chinese presence in the Red Sea, trying to keep the sea lanes open, because it benefits the Chinese to have those sea lanes flowing freely without interruption.
Yes. So what Beijing is going to find if its foreign influence operations go too far is that it will either have to surrender everything it gained then it would have to become the world policeman. And yes, Raptor Rat's exactly right. If you do it right, no one notices. People don't notice when policing is done correctly because their cars don't get broken into. They don't get mugged in the streets. But when the policing is not being done correctly, then yeah, you see stuff like we see sometimes on the West Coast of the U.S. where you can't leave anything in your cars because they get smashed up.
Well, Alex K, honestly, again, we're getting distracted off into a lot of modern politics from the question, so it's a bit of a case of, but it is sort of a modern question. But I would say what you're dealing with, what you're seeing is there are a lot of headline issues. There are always disruptions, things like the sewers and all these stuff issues going on, Red Sea, those problems. The thing was, the trade didn't stop flowing. Mm-hmm. And as Sal would point out, the problem was they were doing enough damage to get headlines and cause minor disruption, and it was relatively minor disruption. They weren't doing enough damage to get actual proper attention. Because when they want to, you go through, you smash them up. Mm-hmm. But also the other issue, as you were saying, is that we've had, I would say again, this is a small problem you've had in the last few years, is you've had an American leadership which was very loath to get involved in anything and do anything.
To be fair, that did mirror the majority of the American sentiment.
Yes, but I would also say that if we judge, and this is going to get me into politics because, please don't take this the wrong way for the Americans. But yes, you need to shut up on this one because you get into trouble when you start talking about American politics. Whilst presidential personalities come and go, usually the more erratic American president is, the more basically unfathomable they are in order to be able to predict what they're going to do, the better it is for the world because the more people don't play around with things. And the cutting cable, and the thing is, that's the thing. When there's a risk that they'll do something, people don't do stuff. When you're dealing with a relatively nice, predictable personality, which unfortunately Obama, etc. was, you tend to take advantage of that situation. The world does. Think about it from your own school days and etc. When you've got a teacher who's very, very staid and will not react to events and always do the stuff, not sure you might well mush around. You can push the boundaries. You know where you can push the boundaries. If you've got a teacher who sometimes might go, I don't really care about this one. Other times might go, you know what, I'm having a bad day. If you go even a millimeter over that line, I'm going to crush you. Yes, it's annoyingly inconsistent, but you're less likely to push it because you don't know what mood is that teacher in today. What are they going to do? So best not to push it because I don't know whether I'm going to get ignored or if I'm going to get chucked into detention for the next month and a half. Mm-hmm. Is it worth me doing it? Yep. And as for the cutting cables in the Baltic, again, I would say, sadly enough, that's been a factor of going on for years. There's a reason why Britain's been investing in it, has bought a ship, the Stirling Castle, and years. That's been part of the plan for over a decade because that's been going on. So the thing is, cutting the cables in the Baltic is something we're talking about now, going, this is happening. But for people who've been touching the subject for the last years, will tell you that's been going on for the last 30 years, of that's been suspected to being actually more than just an accident.
The whole cutting of cables thing, it's not exactly new. We did it 110 years ago to the Germans.
Well, but yes, the British have, by the way, please say, the British have been cutting cables as long as there have been undersea cables, so we're kind of, And
of course, let's not forget the Russians. The Russians are tapping into their most noble of traditions by following the example of the 2nd Pacific Squadron by cutting the cable between Gibraltar and Morocco.
John Moon's question. It's the lead up to World War II, and the UK or US do a Japan and secretly build a huge 18-inch armed battleship. What would it look like?
I'll go first, and then you guys can all put in your ideas. So basically, in terms of and then I'll also quickly answer Alex Cade's question before you guys jump in to give you something to think. In terms of Britain, it's going to be a King George V, but with 9 18-inch guns, and it's expanded to accommodate that. The US probably a scaled up Iowa, because that's a design they're working on at that time, and scaled up. And in Alex K's case, 4 times in half a year. I think the record is for the British in the run up to World War II. There were like 16 incidents in about 4 months, and all were then repaired by the British, and may or may not have involved boxes being attached to those undersea cables. This is nothing new. Sadly enough, it's nothing new. It's something, again, we've had accidents and suspicious accidents have been a common for quite, because one of the problems is ships drag their cables a lot. And so sometimes it is an accident, and sometimes it isn't. Now, gentlemen, what's your battle and lady, of course? What are your battleship looking like?
For the U.S., you're probably getting a Montana. You're essentially moving the Montana to the Iowa slot, and then the Long Tana will probably be the 4-turret version.
Yeah.
So the Montana will probably be a 4-turret version. You might also, because they have the capacity, you might also see them continue to build as-built Iowas.
Yeah.
But more towards the battle cruiser end of the spectrum than the fast end of it, the extra speed and range out of them.
Yeah. For the British, we discussed this on Ramblings a while ago, with Dr. Klopp being present. You're basically looking at the British going, right, okay, this is the way the world works, is it? Okay, so yeah, we're just not dealing with the naval treaties at all. We're just not gonna comply. What the KGVs look like, I'm not entirely sure. They could be 15-inch armed ships, just because the UK will want capable, fast units. Although you better, problem is if they're disregarding the naval treaties, I can see the KGVs being 28-knot ships armored to resist 18-inch guns, but armed with 15s. So basically just disregarding the naval treaties in just entirety.
The question is if they are building an 18-inch gun ship. And if the British had, let's say, like the Japanese, kept an 18-inch gun program going quietly, and so they had an 18-inch gun ready to go. Basically, please note, the design study the British produced King George V and the Lions, because they're basically slightly scaled up versions of each other. And so one of those design studies, there is a larger option. Now, technically, that's the one which has got the quadruple 16-inch guns on it, which would have the 12 16-inch. But that same design could work with 9 18s.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that's why I went with the one I did. I basically that's it.
But I think the big difference is that Britain would announce the laying down of that, probably because there was a point when you had, and I need to remind myself, I can't remember the exact sequence, but it was something like you had the French announce the Richelieu. You had the Italians announce Vittorio Veneto and Littorio, and then the Germans announced Bismarck in very, very quick succession. Now, for starters, that was in 1936, and so at that point, the Royal Navy really should have twigged that the naval treaties were dead because they were all 15-inch armed, so no one is going to follow the 14-inch thing, you stupid people.
The problem with
the Royal Navy did twig. It was Chatfield and it was the government. They were going, Chatfield agrees with us, and Henderson was going, as I've said before, Henderson gets basically an unprecedented agreement out of Chatfield. Chatfield gets the guns he wants, and in return has no influence on any other ship construction at all. Nothing at all.
But I could see, I mean, can you imagine, and this is quite a happy thought, the expressions in the leadership offices in Rome and Berlin when the Royal Navy says, yes, in addition to the King George V's we're building, we're also getting several of these 18-inch armed ships.
You're probably talking about a pair. No more than a pair. because anything more than that will probably strain certain
Three.
certain
I-
certain
I-
parts of the logistics chain.
No, what you probably do is you probably order 4 King George V's, and you order
Yeah.
4 18-inch gunships. So you're ordering 8 battleships overall.
Yeah, that's probably about
Okay.
right. That's probably that sounds more
That's what
realistic.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean-
4 and 4.
Yeah.
And in the nicest way, the British going, oh, by the way, they're 28-knot ships in all weathers.
Yeah.
And the Germans will be
And-
going,
Yeah,
And
but
if I
also-
had to
these
guess,
guys-
what you'll probably see is that it will be kept quiet that these classes are 18s until they're launched.
Yeah, pretty much until they're fitting out, probably.
And they may be very like, oh yeah, we're building more. The Parliament or Congress has approved the building of so many different, whatever number of hulls, and essentially people will see, will go past Norfolk Naval Shipyard and be like, ooh, Newport News Shipbuilding, and be like, ooh, that's a really big hull, and kind of be like, it's a battleship, okay, whatever. And
Yeah.
then when they're launched or when they're just about ready to commission, that's when they'll be announced that they're 18 inches. And they'll just kind of let everybody assume that they are plus-sized 16s instead of 18s.
It's the 15-inch super special.
yeah,
15-inch
How very
star.
British of you.
Yes.
that seems about right.
Yes.
Which also feels like it's a good sort of that's what she said moment as well. But probably smaller inches.
Harvey
But
Clarence,
yeah.
what was the role of the carrier battle groups in a war with the Soviet Union? They push up through the North Atlantic, threatening the northern the bastions, and if they managed to penetrate the bastions, would then be attacking the Soviet Union and territories in the Soviet Union. And they're providing cover for the submarines to go hunting for the ballistic missile fleet.
Yeah,
Because it was known that if you could take out the Soviet ballistic missile force, submarine ballistic missile force, then the Soviets get very, very scared very quickly, and you might get something out of it. We're getting flashes between Dan's camera and Runon's camera.
yeah, because
Yeah,
what I
it's
will
whoever's
say,
making noise
because
at the time. Blame Discord.
yeah, it's important to
Yeah.
bear in mind that for the Russians, in the event of any hot war, their safe conflict resolution assets are their boomers. Because they know their
Yeah.
bomber fleet can be hit, they know their silos can be hit, they know their mobile launchers can be hit. Their boomers are safe for the most part.
The moment you can
Bruno,
start penetrating the bastions in sufficient force, then they're in trouble. And yes, bless you, Runon.
Yeah,
Bless
the whole reason for the massive growth in the Soviets' heavy surface forces in the 1970s and 80s is to basically go, we have a growing fleet of SSBNs. NATO can
We need to
reach
protect them.
Yeah. Like, the reason why you see things like the Kirovs is, it's basically a keep your carriers away, because we also have backfires. And we will, if necessary, use the backfires, and the Kirovs, and the Kievs, and everything else we have, to make it a very, very painful process for you. What was it NATO estimates were? I think it was...
Yeah.
They expected to lose 3 to 4 carriers to get into the bastions, I think it was.
Yeah. They're expecting to send out. Are they expecting to have to send in a strike fleet of at least 6 to 8, and expecting to lose 50%?
Yeah.
But they are also expecting for the Soviets to have to basically be annihilated entirely.
Mm-hmm. But
Now, when they were expecting those losses, were they expecting them in the sense of the ship is on the bottom and unrecoverable,
On
or
the
the
bottom.
ship is going to be spending the rest of the war in dry dock?
no, losses. We're talking losses. On the bottom, that is it. You're done.
Yeah, they're gone.
Like-
And yeah,
Because the...
does that mean that our north that you could get fish and chips that kind of cooks itself if it's been swimming too close to the sunk reactors?
Yeah, because the funny... Yeah.
And don't you already have a higher cancer risk?
Very
No,
funny.
that would be Dr. Clark being in Cornwall. They have excessive xenon, I think it is, coming through. So that's why it's something like the equivalent of a chest X-ray to either fly to, I think, Spain, or go for a walk for the day on Dartmoor.
Wow. That's
Yeah, something like
Yeah, it's fun.
that.
What do you think the odds are if that I walk on Dartmoor, I'll get hit with just the right radiation to shut off that little Y chromosome activation gene?
Nah.
That's as funny as it would be. That's not how it works. Sadly, we all wish it was because it makes
Nice
it so
thing,
much
everyone.
easier.
Why would the Royal Navy, with 1 Eagle Star converted admiral and 3 courageous, allow the Royal Navy to? Why would the Royal Navy want?
Huh?
What?
Okay, so I'm guessing we delete the Y. So would the Royal Navy, with 1 Eagle Star converted admiral and 3 courageous, allow the Royal Navy to determine whether admiral or courageous sized carriers were the future of our aircraft carriers? You have to remember, and I would like to point this out. Both the USN and the Royal Navy worked out what the future aircraft carriers were. It's just the trouble for both of them was the difference in the scenarios. For the Americans, they're operating in the Pacific, where they need to do mass fleet strikes as a whole because there's no ground support and no likelihood. For the British, the reality is that they're operating at the end of their logistics train in the Far East, or they're operating in the Mediterranean, both of which require vessels for different reasons to be slightly more survivable, because if you lose the ship, then you'll go from having a carrier to having no carrier. And it's better to have a slightly small air group and actually have a carrier than have no carrier. So basically, they can have both of those. That doesn't change really what their compromises they're probably going to go for under the Washington Naval Treaty and the London Naval Treaties, because you can see what designs they'd like to go for. They're called the Maltas or the Midways, because the moment they're completely free of the treaties and they're building to basically what they would like to go for themselves, look at how big those things are and look at how well both of them are armored and survivability.
Yep.
That's it, basically.
That's
Hopefully that answers your questions. Black Horse, why was the Japanese damage control worse than World War II? Honestly,
Because
I'd
they
say
did not. I would lay. Sorry,
No worries. Karen, run on.
I would lay the responsibility for that at 2 different things. One would be the general technical education for Japan was lower than that of some of its peers, just as a common knowledge kind of thing. And 2, it was not seen as a prestigious of a billet, so it did not tend to attract the same caliber of officer as other billets did.
I'd say
I would add there's actually a bigger, there's a more bigger problem, and I'll put in my own 2 pence before Dan shows up. It's because also they don't have the massive losses in World War One and the Russo-Japanese War. They don't have massive losses, which means it's going to sound strange. A lot of the British emphasis on damage control in World War Two comes out of their experiences in World War One, where they lost a lot of shit, where they lost ships like Abaker, Cressy, and Hogue, etc. There's, World War Two is exercising a lot of demons for the Royal Navy. And again, for the Americans, I would say that quite a lot of their desire for damage control again comes out to extent out of some of their experiences in World War One, but also some of their experiences in early World War Two, especially because a lot of the American damage control, we often talk about the damage control. You have to remember the capabilities they have in 1945 in terms of damage control are not the capabilities they have in 1941. The damage control gets a lot better over the war. It was already better than the Japanese, don't get me wrong. But I would say when you're talking about damage control 1939, 1941, the most paranoid nation in the world about it, and so naval service, is the British. By 1945, the Americans have an edge. But that's the difference is it's because of their experiences in war, because that's where damage control and desire for obsession with it comes from. It's your experiences in war.
Yeah. What I would like to say, though, is that you said the Japanese didn't suffer any big losses during, either the...
But they didn't suffer losses which were big enough to shock them. This is the point. That's the phrase. I should have phrased it better. It doesn't shock them enough, the losses.
I'm not saying you're not wrong. It's just that I would have thought losing a pair of battleships to mines would have made them...
Not at the time, no. Because mines were ship killers. Losing something to something which is designed to take them out as a one-shot kill is pretty much it. No, I think actually the other problem for the Japanese was actually their doctrine, which was very heavily based on the quick war. You know, it's the same thing that's behind a lot of their aircraft and why they also didn't worry quite so much about the armor and armored flight decks. It's different from the US way of reaching the same thing with their carriers, was that they, and it's what the Germans had planned as well, which was you go for a short war on your terms, you accept that you'll have casualties, but that's because anyone who's you've dedicated to damage control isn't dedicated to something more offensive.
Dan?
Yeah.
Can you check your mic? Because it keeps cutting out. Is it Discord or is it your mic?
That's a you thing, I think, because he's coming in 5x5 for me.
Same for me.
He's a little distorted, but perfectly
You're also-
legible.
Okay, so I'm going to have to do something quickly. Just carry on chatting away, but it's basically going
We
to be.
can't, because if you leave the voice channel, then we stop.
Well, no, just
broadcast.
carry on chatting away amongst yourselves while I quickly do a quick skip in and skip out.
Rudon, what are you making on that? I can't see.
Oh, there must have been a Death Star canteen.
Draconian Berserkers, I think.
What berserkers?
The dwarf.
Jotun. The Jotun.
Hang on. No, the Votan.
That's the one. Them's the cookies.
I know not the.
Guys at the top of the box.
Okay, I know not this, but I with my hand-eye coordination, there is a reason I am paid for my what's the right way of putting it? My mind rather than my hand-eye coordination. I may technically have a degree in surgery, but yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You don't want me doing that.
But it could
Alright,
be
I
so
think
much
that's it.
fun.
Aye.
Also, Dr. Clark, please harass me to put together the OBS profile for you, because I keep forgetting to do it in a timely and efficient manner.
Don't worry. Right, so at some point we're going to work out why Discord is mucking up on my computer, because I quickly checked my network settings as well, and the network is not in anywhere near maximum capacity at the moment.
Rudon, we accept any delays in that because we know that you're making the Minecraft server and making sure that it's the.
Not making a Minecraft server.
It's going to be glorious.
Sorry,
It's going to be
probably
amazing.
now at the stage of maintaining the Minecraft server.
Thank you, team. Yeah, fun. Thank you. I have to admit, I did love it that the fence decided to blow down this week. I have to say, I did love it that the fence decided to blow down and everything else decided to go wrong in this month. And January, by the way, for those who don't know this, and this is a little thing on behalf of Fleet, on behalf of Drac, there is a kind of a standard comment in amongst most YouTubers and most people who do this sort of stuff, and is that for some reason every time it comes to January and February, that is the times of year when we will have the least come in, when we will have the least money, where we're most likely to have issues with paying bills and things, because that for some reason every other month of the year will stay pretty constant, might go up a bit, might go down, but yeah, January, and the reason it's not actually that big a mystery. Let's be honest. Most people have greater expenses in these months, so they aren't able to sort of have as much free spending to contribute to people like myself, and fully understand it. And that's life, but it is fun.
I can actually answer it as far as Twitch and YouTube go, though.
Yeah.
Or I can provide an answer. Let me put it that way. All the ad buys.
Can you all do me a favor? Can you log out the chat and log back in? Because I tried logging out, logging in, and resetting it, and it hasn't worked. So can you all log out and log in quickly on the Discord? Yeah.
Can do.
Just see if that makes it work.
Okay, that's the best I can do without doing a complete system. First off, Teemu, I am not learning Rust, and I don't want to learn Java. It's bad enough I have to learn C#.
You poor unfortunate soul, you have my sympathy.
Dragon, it has gotten so bad that in some of the art communities that I'm in, when they link all effectively
While I'm quickly dropping out, I will very quickly say to my stream, unfortunately, owing to issues with the stream software, we'll have to call this here. We've had a good hour and a half. We have reached the point where we have got the king in, and we have reinforced his rule. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you all next week. Take care.